Hello everyone, welcome to my fourth and final DMT trip report video. I'm going to talk about one more trip report, and also I'm just going to summarize my experience with DMT. If you haven't checked out my first 3 videos in this sort of mini series, I recommend you watch those first. There's links in the description for those videos. Today I'm going to talk about one more trip report, and then like I said, I'm going to summarize just my overall experience and feelings towards DMT. So this last trip I'm going to share with you is a weird experience I had. It's another bad trip. I know I share a lot of bad trips. I honestly feel like I get way more bad trips than the average person. I'm not totally sure why that is, but I'm pretty sure it has something to do with my depression, which is something I've struggled with on and off for the last 10 years. Either way, it doesn't deter me. I think the bad trips are kind of like cool in a way, which is funny. I've always said that when I get nightmares, I kind of like them, they're exhilarating in a way. You wake up and you're safe and everything's fine, but you also get to experience this crazy once-in-a-lifetime experience. I guess you can compare it to whatever people get out of horror films, which ironically I'm not into at all. Horror films just always seem to bore me. I can never get into them. Except when I was a kid, The Exorcist, that movie scared the shit out of me. That was one exception. That was a scary film. Anyways, this was a sort of another bad trip. So if you've seen my second DMT video with the green thumbnail, where I talk about this little yellow robot that was giving me like advertisements for different universes, I said then that robot would appear in later trips, and so this is one of those trips. In that trip that I told you about, he was nice and friendly, and he was yellow, right, which is like a happy friendly color, and he was showing me these advertisements for universes, and he was like hopping around sort of. He was like this cute little robot character. But in this trip I pissed him off. So this trip was probably within about a month of the first time I saw that robot. Okay, so also in my last video I told you about the bad trip where I tried to smoke the DMT by heating the coil that it was all stuck in and like using a tube and doing this stupid method where I ended up dropping it and burning myself. But I said I've done that once and was successful. It was the second time I burned myself. So this was a trip where I was successful with that method. And I don't know how much DMT was in that coil because I put quite a bit in trying to get it to work and thinking that it had just dissipated or burned up. But it was all sinking into that coil. So there must have been a lot in there. Because when I took this hit, it was only one hit and I instantly blasted off. It was weird because that happened to me only once before, where as soon as I blew up my first hit, I was just gone completely. So this trip I have no idea what I dosed. I just took a hit out of that coil with that stupid method, which again I go into more detail with that method in my last video. But I took the hit, I put all my shit aside, and I blew it out. And as I was blowing it out, my vision was going black and I was in outer space. So the trip was fairly brief before I blacked out, but I was flying through space and almost immediately, like I said, I blew up my first hit and I was gone instantly. I was in space and I came across this giant room the size of like a warehouse, which in the DMT universe I guess isn't that big. It was just like a regular warehouse, but I was above it and the roof was off of it. And so I could see down on this warehouse from like a bird's eye view. It looked like a video game actually. It looked like a real-time strategy video game like StarCraft or Command & Conquer or something. But I was above this giant warehouse and inside I saw all these mechanical workers moving around and picking up shit and moving it around, and there's just a lot of shit going on. It looked like a busy industrial building. So this trip was very hazy. The details aren't too clear. It hit me very quickly, very intensely, and it was over very quickly. But what I do remember is while I was watching the warehouse, and this must have only been about 30 or 40 seconds into the trip, but that yellow robot from the other trip flew up from the warehouse and appeared in front of my vision, and he was just floating there, and he was friendly and fine, and everything was good. But then I looked back at the warehouse, and for some reason I could see right up close to it now, and I could see into some room, and I don't quite remember how I saw this. It might have been on like a screen or something, but I saw this like code, and it was in this like alien font that I couldn't recognize, but it was some code, and I got the sense that it was a really important code. And then when I looked back at the robot again, he was flipping out. He was very, very angry that I saw this code, and he turned completely red. All his yellow parts turned red, and he was very mad that I saw this code. And then it was communicated to me. This is where it started getting blurry, right before I blacked out, but it was communicated to me somehow through that robot that I'd seen the secret code to the universe, whatever that meant. But basically humans weren't supposed to see this code, and I saw this code and I was in huge trouble. And this robot was super mad at me. He was like flipping around. There's like steam coming out of him and stuff. But the consequences, I guess, weren't too bad, because after that I sort of started blacking out, and I don't remember too much of that trip after that. So that's pretty much it. Those are my trip reports for DMT. I know that one was kind of lackluster, but that was my last one. I've had a lot more good experiences with DMT, but they just weren't really interesting enough for a trip report. You know, it's just like I got high and saw crazy visuals, and then I wasn't high again. And those just weren't that memorable to me. I found in the end my best DMT trips were my most unique trips. Not necessarily the ones where I've blasted off the furthest, or ones that were so mind-bending I couldn't even put them into words. In fact, I found a lot of my more interesting DMT trips were my sub-breakthrough trips. They were more unique and varied, I found, than my breakthrough trips, which might have been more satisfying and gratifying internally. But when it comes to telling an interesting story, the ones where I was sort of like on the border of breaking through or sub-breakthrough, I found to be more interesting and more funny, and they just made for more interesting trip reports. The DMT trips where I really blasted off were really amazing and satisfying and beautiful, but just you can't really put them into words. It's just like you're gone and you experience this beautiful thing, then you come back. You really only understand what the trip was like a little bit after the trip, and then as time goes on you sort of forget what happened. It's sort of weird, but in the moment I know they were just mind-blowingly beautiful. Mind-blowingly. Is that a word? Sure. Like I said before, I do have some DMT left. I haven't done it in about a year, close to a year now, but I don't even know if it's good anymore. It should be, right? But there's about 3 trips left in that baggie, and I've been really nervous to do it for quite a while because I've had a string of bad trips at the end there, but I think I'm about ready to do it again. And maybe I will film my trip and then post it and do like a live trip report. Not like a live stream, that would be crazy, but I'll record the trip and then post it. I've had a few of you request that, so maybe I'll do that, but I don't think it will be that interesting, to be honest with you. I've tried doing that before, recording my trips, and one of 2 things happened. Either I noticed the camera was there while I was tripping and it kind of threw off my trip, or I would smoke it and blow it out, and then I just kind of fall over, and then about eight minutes later I would sit up and be like, and just look around for like a minute or 2, and then I'd shut off the camera. So there's no real point to a live DMT trip, I find, but I'll try it anyways eventually. I don't know if it's going to be anytime soon. I got to build up the courage to do it. Honestly, I am a bit nervous. I'm kind of gun shy. Also, I'll do my 5-MeO DMT trip report next. Like I mentioned, I didn't have a great experience with that, but it was a really weird physical high, and I had a couple crazy trips with that. So summing up DMT is kind of difficult for me. I don't think most people have had as many bad trips as I have. Also, even the good trips I've had seem to have had weird themes that don't seem common with other people. So I acknowledge I didn't have a normal experience with DMT, but I still stand by the statement I made in my first video where I don't think DMT is the drug a lot of people make it out to be. People make it out to be this supernatural thing that I've heard people say this many times. When someone refers to it as a drug, they say DMT is not a drug. It's something different than a drug. So it's somehow different than acid or mushrooms or other psychedelics. I just can't make that leap. It's a very intense drug. It hits you very quickly. It's very unique in its effects. But if you do 1,000 micrograms or more of acid, or you do like a quarter of mushrooms, you're going to get experiences comparable to DMT, if not more intense. And then also I've done 4-ACO DMT several times where it felt a lot like DMT for a few moments. So I don't think DMT is like different than other drugs, you know. It's just another psychedelic, you know. And then there are a lot of drugs that are comparable to DMT but are a little bit different, like 5-MeO DMT, for example, or other drugs. And so it's like they're not considered supernatural, but DMT is. It's like, where do you draw the line? It's like, I don't buy any of that crap where it's a spirit, it's a portal to another dimension. It's telling you something about life. The funny thing is, all these trips, all these crazy experiences happen within life. And the more I do psychedelics, the less weird they seem to me and the stranger life seems to me. Psychedelics make me question life, and they make life seem like more of a mystery, and they make life more intriguing and more trippy. And I guess what I'm trying to say is life is the trip. And that's maybe one thing DMT taught me, is that life is the trip. But then acid has also taught me that. Like in my last video where I talk about my crazy acid trip, where I just broke down the world into data and zeros and ones, that just made me look at life so differently, and it made me realize how strange life is. That's what psychedelics do. They make you realize how weird our existence is. So to me, DMT is just a small, minuscule component of a much larger, much more intricate thing that we call life. The more you try to understand our reality, the more you understand how incomprehensible it is. So no one really knows what the answer is. Everyone's experience is different. And that's kind of one thing that annoys me about the DMT world, or psychedelics in general. There's a lot of gatekeepers and a lot of snobby motherfuckers. There's a lot of snobby fucks that'll say, oh, that wasn't a breakthrough, or you didn't experience this or that, or blah blah blah. They'll try to tell you what you experienced when there's no set definition for any of that shit. It's all what you make it. Everyone's perspective is different. What's a breakthrough to one person might not be to another person. There's about a million different definitions of ego death, but there's no line. It's not a black and white thing, it's a gradient. It's not like, oh, if I did one more microgram, or if I smoked one more milligram, I would have broke through. I was so close, No, it's all a spectrum. So I don't know. It's just funny to me when people try to tell you what you experienced when everyone experiences it differently. And there's too much snobbery in the psychedelics world, and it's annoying. Like, I saw this guy in the YouTube comments the other day going off telling these people to shut up. He's like, I opened my third eye, you guys haven't opened it yet. And he was like looking down on them and like condescending them because they haven't opened their third eye, when obviously this guy is just lying to himself. What does it even mean to open your third eye? That's another thing just invented and perpetuated by psychedelic culture. It's a third eye. I opened my third eye. What's that mean exactly? There's not actually a third eye in your head. You realize that. What, the pineal gland? You think that's your third eye? There's something about it linked to DMT, but like to say you open your third eye, that just means something different to everybody. And it's just such a convoluted thing. No one really knows what they're talking about, I feel like, because psychedelics are just so intense and so unique to each individual. I just don't see how anyone can know what they're talking about. All you can understand is your own experience. You can't understand other people's experiences, or where they draw the line, or where they set the bar, or where they define this as that, or this is that, or that is this. A psychedelic trip is such a bizarre thing, and two people could do the same dose and be taken to two completely different places. And as I've gotten older too, my trips have changed. Like, I remember the first time I did mushrooms, I was 16 or 17 years old, and that was such a wild trip. It felt like a circus. It was so fun and so colorful. Now if I do mushrooms, it's a lot different. It's a lot more mental, a lot less visual, and it's just way different. Still great, but just in a different way. And it's just changed over the years. So it's funny, my dad would always say, oh, the acid nowadays is no good. The acid nowadays is no good. When I was a kid in the 60s and did acid, it was crazy, But as I started to realize that the production methods for acid hasn't really changed, and it's still obviously very easy to get very good quality acid today, I'm realizing the acid isn't changing, it's him that's changing. Because I've started noticing acid changing too as I get older. And it's not the drug that's changing, it's me for sure. So how can you get a consensus as to what the psychedelic experience should be when it's just so different for everybody at different stages of their life and based on their personality? There's just so many variables. So DMT is a really cool drug. If you ever get a chance to try it out. If you have a sitter, make sure you have a sitter. Don't do it like I did. I made a lot of mistakes that way, but Yeah, it's pretty cool, and it's very safe actually compared to other drugs. But is it the ultimate psychedelic drug, as a lot of people make it out to be? Not for me. Not for me. I think acid is the ultimate psychedelic drug, and I even prefer mushrooms over DMT. It says they're two different things, you know? If you want to have a good night and have fun and stuff, you do mushrooms or acid. If you want to have a isolated, solitary, quick, uh, powerful experience, and do DMT. But that's just not as appealing to me. You know, I like to party. DMT is not a party drug, but it's very cool. It's very cool. All right, that's it, guys. That's it for my DMT trip report. I'm going to have more trip reports on 5-MeO DMT, 4-ACO DMT, acid, mushrooms. But DMT for now is done until, you know, I smoke the rest of that shit. Whenever that may be, we'll see. I'm glad you all seem to have enjoyed my mini DMT series. Thank you all for the views, the comments, the likes, the feedback, and all that stuff. I appreciate it. Stay tuned for more videos in the future. Have a good one. Cheers.
Once again.